Cool. Hi, everyone. So my name is Justina Lichnik. I'm a program manager on the solution template team. And today we're going to be talking about enterprise Power BI deployments with Microsoft Power BI solution templates. I did not choose that title, my manager did. But yeah, so just before we start, just as a show of hands, how many of you guys have heard of solution templates? Okay, so I'd say about half the room. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with just making sure we're all on the same page, introducing what solution templates are, what kind of use cases we have, why should you care about them. And then we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into a few of the ones that we've released recently. We released Facebook Page Analytics, which maybe you saw at Kamal's session yesterday. We released Azure API Management today. And we're also going to be having David from Neil Analytics talk about one of the partner solutions that we're going to be releasing very, very soon as well. After that, we're going to go through a little bit of the roadmap, and then we're going to leave some time for Q&A. So to start out with, what are solution templates? So the idea of a solution template really is we connect to source applications. We extract data out of these source applications, and then we go ahead and enrich that data, extend it, potentially with other things, and then we land it in a data warehouse. And then we have Power BI reports that sit on top of this data. And really, when we think about how we go about designing these solution templates, we always have the use case in mind. So who's the persona we're designing for? What's the kind of use case we're thinking about? So you'll see we'll have things like, let's say, sales management. We'll have brand and campaign management. So it's always about the use case and the persona first. What kind of reports do we want to design from them? And then we think about, OK, what source application do we want to connect to? And what does that pipeline look like? And often we will then also focus on the scenarios where we have a source application that is pretty generic in terms of the amount of customizations it requires. And also, the other thing is also it kind of needs to have a quite big kind of part of the market share so that we cover quite a large chunk of the market. And so really the aim of the solution templates is they're designed for partners and for customers. And so they're very easy to extend. So when we go ahead and deploy a solution template, everything gets deployed on a user's Azure subscription. So you have access to all of the different resources, you have access to all of the infrastructure, and you can go ahead and extend and customize them as much as you like. So we kind of are saying, well, here's a starting point, go ahead and do whatever you want with this solution afterwards. And again, we focus on them being enterprise ready. So the idea is, they're scalable. We have people who are experts in SQL analysis services, ensuring we're bringing in the best technical practices. We spend a lot of time talking with domain experts, with customers, to make sure we're bringing in the best business use cases. So we really spend a lot of time to ensuring that we kind of have the right business and technical use cases together. So why should you care? What's in it for you in terms of the solution templates? Well, first of all, it allows you to lead with industry conversations. So as I said, we focus on the use cases. We focus on ensuring we target a specific persona. And so the idea is you can go and have a conversation with a customer about what is a specific use case that you want to target, what is a specific solution, talk about the type of reporting you can do rather than talking about the technology that supports it. So you have, and I'll show you guys when I'm showing you the solution templates, you'll see we have a bunch of sample reports which you can go ahead and interact with straight away. So you can take a look at what the solution template looks like before you even set it up. And also, it's very, very quick and easy to set up. So you can go ahead and set it up for a customer in literally a couple of minutes and have something ready to talk about, something real on top of their own data. So yeah, you can basically do very rapid POCs. And today I'll be showing you kind of an end-to-end flow of what the Facebook template looks like. So you'll have an idea just how quickly you can go about setting something like this up. And it means you can focus on the customer requirements rather than focusing on how you're going to get the data out of somewhere, how you're going to pipe that data through, what the ETL is going to look like. You can just focus on what kind of business requirements you want to be focusing on rather than the kind of, again, infrastructure pieces. So the idea, again, with the templates is we start with widely adopted apps. We have a couple of areas that we focus on. We have a bunch of templates for Dynamics 365 around the sort of sales, analytics, sales management. And I'll show you, all the templates we have in AppSource in just a second as well. We have a bunch of brand and campaign management solution templates for things like Twitter, for news, for Facebook. We also focus on IT with things like system-centered configuration. We also have one for Azure Activity Logs as well, and the new one we're going to be talking about, which is for Azure API Management. And we also connect to SAP. So with that, I really just want to kind of jump into demos and spend most of this session talking about demos and showing you guys the solution templates rather than talking about them with slides. So the first one I really want to jump into is the Facebook page analytics ones. Now, if you guys are familiar with solution templates, you might have seen we have had released one for Facebook a while back. This is kind of like a different persona and use case for the Facebook one. The one we released a while back was really around doing content analytics, so being able to follow public pages and being able to do things like sentiment analysis, key phrase extraction, seeing how, let's say, a bunch of different pages compare to each other. The one we've released right now is more focused on looking at the metrics that come out of Facebook as a page owner. So if I own a given page, Facebook has literally hundreds of metrics you can get access to. And we've kind of created this solution template that pulls out all those metrics and organizes them in a really kind of intuitive and consumable way inside the reports so that it's easy to consume everything. Again, everything will get deployed on your Azure subscription, so you can go ahead and extend it. If you want to bring in, let's say, your Twitter data, your Instagram data, you can go ahead and customize that pipeline. You have access to, you can make changes to the ETL, you can make changes to the data warehouse or to the reports themselves. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump straight into demos. So where do you actually find these solution templates? So if you go on the Power BI website, you'll notice that under the Solutions tab over here, there's something called Solution Templates. And this is basically where all of the solution templates are hosted. I didn't want to navigate here. And basically, it redirects you to AppSource, and this is basically where all the solution templates are. And you can see we have a bunch of different, all the different use cases I was telling you guys about. We have the ones focused on social media, around things like Twitter, news. We have things around dynamics, so we have things like customer service, analytics, we have project service automation, credits and collections, and so on. A few of the IT scenarios as well. And the one I want to kind of jump into to start off with is the brand management one for Facebook. Now, how many of you guys were at Kamal's session out of curiosity? Okay, a few. So this should be really fresh for most of you, which is great. So we actually had, on Kamal's session, we introduced the Facebook solution template, and we actually had it presented with Rafa from Real Madrid. So we have actually been working with Real Madrid on this scenario to, again, kind of be customer-focused, business-focused around the scenario, and understanding how Real Madrid runs their business, and that's kind of how we went about designing the solution template that you're about to see. So in terms of the solution template, in terms of this page, there's a few things I just want to call out. Every template will have a video explaining what the template is and how you can go about using it. There will be a bunch of screenshots you can see. And what's also really important is there's this test drive experience. And what this test drive experience takes you to is an embedded Power BI report, which you can go ahead and interact with. And this will just make it full screen. I've already opened it up over here because it's loaded. And you can go ahead and interact with this Power BI report. And this is exactly what the solution template will look like when you set it up yourself, except on your own data. But it just gives you a quick idea of what it is that you will be setting up. So in this particular case, we've just gone ahead and set this up on the Power BI Facebook page. And so I'll take you guys through kind of a high-level scenario of the types of insights you can get using something like the Facebook page analytics solution template. So this first page is all about looking at your kind of audience analytics, looking at how am I gaining and acquiring fans, how am I losing fans, and how is that changing across time? Are these fans growing organically? Is it through paid new fans versus organic new fans? The next page is really looking at a breakdown of all the various insights that you can get out of Facebook. And literally, there's hundreds of different insights that you can get. So it's been one of the biggest challenges, just organizing this in a way that's very, very easy to consume for everyone. So what you'll see over here is, for example, the insight that's selected is people reached. And you can see the page insight details, which is kind of the contextual insight for this particular one. And you can kind of jump between them and see all the different things that are relevant specifically to people reached. And what's pretty cool about this is I can go ahead and navigate to something like, let's say, storytellers. And you'll see that actually this graph updates to now contextualize it around storytellers rather than the page insights. And you can see how things change across time. And you can also see sort of this interesting funnel chart, which is really talking about, okay, in this particular time period, how many brand posts were posted onto the Facebook page, how many storytellers did we engage, and how many page stories were created out of that, how many people did we reach with those stories, and you can kind of get an idea of the widespread reach for that particular insight, and then what happened as a result. So how many new fans did we acquire, and how many page clicks did we get? And we're also building out this reference library, so if there's any kind of metric you're not sure about, you can actually just go ahead and click on this, and this will navigate you to this library that we're setting up, which basically gives you an overview of exactly what this metric shows you for every single one of them. So if we jump back into, oh, where did it go? Into here. I'm going to go through these pages again pretty quickly just to give you an overview of what kinds of things you can do. So again, something that's also really important for Facebook analytics is your demographics. You want to understand your users. You want to understand your audiences. So for a given insight, you can understand, for example, in terms of fans, okay, what's the majority, what's the gender of my fans in terms of the majority? So we can see majority for, let's say, Power BI fans, it's male, in the age group of 25 to 34. In the US, but actually the highest city is Bangalore, and most predominant language is English. And you can get a more granular breakdown of all of these different metrics in the graphs on the right-hand side. And again, I can kind of interact with these and see how this varies for all the different metrics that we see. Again, this is very important for someone like, let's say, Real Madrid, where they want to give their corporate sponsors an idea of, what kind of markets they should be targeting, kind of, and so they're not only the consumers of these reports, but then they also go ahead and share these insights with other stakeholders. Moving on, we've also got things around, let's say, post engagement. So what are the optimal times for me to go ahead and post on Facebook, given what kind of metrics am I seeing around the timings of posts? So things like that are very, very important. We have things around actual engagement in terms of reactions. So what kind of posts are getting what kind of reactions in terms of likes, in terms of shares, in terms of comments. And I can go ahead and filter across and show me top ranked posts for a particular type of reaction. And finally, we have also a page that looks at video analytics. So, how many people are engaging with my videos? How much of the videos are they watching? Are they watching the full video or only watching 3 seconds of a video? So again, these are the sorts of insights you can be getting with the Facebook page analytics template. But how do you actually go about setting something like this up? So let's say you're talking to a customer and they're like, yeah, this looks great. How fast can I get it? Well, you can literally go ahead and set this whole thing up in about 5 minutes. And the way you do that is by clicking on Get It Now. And Get It Now gets you basically into this getting started experience. And for every single template, we have this web-based installer, and you have an idea of what things will look like in terms of the architecture and in terms of the infrastructure that's set up once everything has run. So if I just zoom into this a little bit, you'll see this is the actual architecture for this Facebook solution template. And for every single template that we have, this architecture will look a little bit different because the way we've kind of built our platform and our installer is we can go ahead and support whatever infrastructure is really right and appropriate for the given template that we're looking at. So in terms of Facebook, the way we go about doing things is we go ahead and spin up a logic app, and we spin up something called an Azure function. And the logic app, if for those of you guys who are not familiar with logic apps, it allows you to kind of execute a business workflow. And in this particular case, the business workflow is actually really, really simple. We just basically say on a schedule, we basically write a message into a queue, and then the Azure function goes ahead and reads that message of the queue. So that kind of might seem a little bit, a little bit weird. Why do we have this queue in between? But it's to do with just ensuring we don't get any timeouts between the logic app and function. So that's kind of one way we went about overcoming that. And what the logic app actually does is it just writes the last 7 days into the function. And then the function basically reads, says, okay, you want data for the last 7 days, and then it goes ahead and calls. All the logic gets basically done inside the Azure function. For those of you guys not familiar with functions, it basically allows you to execute code in the cloud. So we just run some C# code that basically calls the Facebook Page Insights APIs, calls the Facebook Posts APIs, and basically brings all of that data in for the specific number of days that we require, and goes ahead and writes all of that data into Azure SQL. So part of this template is also going to spin up an Azure SQL. You actually have a choice whether you want to use an existing SQL or you can use a new SQL. And then the installer will give you a Power BI desktop file. It'll give you a Power BI report, which you can go ahead and straight away interact with because that pipeline that we've built is already flowing, the data is already flowing through it. So everything is basically just set up. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to set things up here, and hopefully it'll all go right. And we'll be able to see data later on in the presentation. So here we give people a choice, because as I said, we support 2 use cases now. We support one, which is the old Facebook we've already had, which is the content analytics one, where we're only looking at publicly available data. So in this case, you would say, I want to monitor Facebook for pages that I don't own. In this case, we actually want to monitor Facebook pages that we do own. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, let's log in. And that should redirect me to a Facebook authentication just to basically give my app permissions to be able to pull data. So I've already authenticated before, so it's just gone ahead and done that. So I have access to the Microsoft developer Facebook page, which I'm apparently now a Facebook admin on because I've got all these great connections. But No, so now the next step we basically do is connect to Azure. So this is a really important step, and you'll see this for every single template that we do have. And the idea over here is, again, we are giving our app permissions to your Azure subscription, and that allows us to go ahead and spin up all of those resources I showed you on your Azure subscription on your behalf. So as a user, what's really important for us is to remove the friction inside these solution templates. So the idea is basically, I can go ahead and spin all that stuff up. I can go ahead and stitch up all those different resources, and you don't have to worry about how exactly that's being done. This is just done automatically for you. If you want to go ahead and edit any of that stuff, and you want to configure any of it, you are absolutely welcome to do that. But when you're setting this up, you shouldn't have to worry about how everything is kind of working together. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of my Azure subscriptions. I'm just going to call it Facebook Demo Ignite, and click Next. And now this is just validating that I actually have right permissions into this Azure subscription. Now this is what I was telling you guys about. You have a choice. You can either go ahead and use a new Azure SQL instance. For the purpose of time, I'm just going to use an existing one. And so I'm going to go ahead and just connect to an existing Azure SQL I already own. But again, you could just go ahead and say, OK, choose a name, choose a username, password, and have it spun up here on the spot. And again, one of the things that often people ask is this kind of just a layer on top of ARM? The answer is kind of yes and no. Yes, it is in terms of we are using ARM to spin up a bunch of these resources, but we're also not constrained to ARM. So we can go ahead and run our own custom C# code. We can go ahead and connect to Office, connect to Dynamics. So we can kind of operate outside of the ARM world as well. So this is now returning me a list of databases I have access to. So I'm just going to select one of these databases. Click Next, and that's pretty much it in terms of the setup. It's asking me the kind of customization questions it needs, and I can click Run, and hopefully everything will just work beautifully and get set up. I'm not going to ask you guys to sit here and watch this yellow bar kind of progress for the next 10 minutes, so we're going to swiftly move on to the next demo, but we will come back here just to make sure everything has spun up, and what we should then see is me actually being able to connect to this Microsoft Developer Facebook account and seeing the exact same reports I was showing you guys over here, but with the Microsoft Developer Facebook data rather than the Power BI data that you're seeing over here. So we will come back to this. So the next demo, I'm just going to jump back to the slides just for a second. Actually, before I jump into the slides, there's one more thing I wanted to point out over here. The other thing that's really important for us is, again, one of our really important stories of the templates is they're fully extensible, and we want partners to pick them up and go ahead and extend and customize them. So for any template that we do have, we have a list of partners who we basically recommend for this template. So if this is something you are interested in, you basically can reach out to us. We have some basic requirements. You just need to be a Power BI partner. You need to prove that you've at least set up the template once. You've gone through our documentation. Show us the output of the template you have set up. And if you can prove you understand a template and you set it up before, you can be a recommended partner. That's listed basically over here, and then you can contact a partner straight from over here, and this will basically, if I fill in my details, it'll send just a direct lead to the partner with regards to this template. So again, we are trying to encourage very highly that you guys go ahead and customize and extend these templates and do customizations, like let's say bring in additional data sources or maybe build in some machine learning into them. There's a ton of different things that could be done because, again, you have access to all the different pieces that are spun up. So in terms of the next demo, I wanted to talk about Azure API management. So this is a very, very different use case from the Facebook one that I was showing you. This is very much aimed at an IT professional. It's about monitoring your API traffic activities. And for those of you guys who aren't familiar, Azure API management is actually an offering inside Azure, which allows you to, is that kind of management layer on top of your API. So it allows you to go ahead and monitor them, set up SKUs. And if you guys have any questions about Azure API management, we do have the API management PM who we collaborated on this template. So you can go ahead and ask him during the Q&A. But yeah, in general, in terms of the template, very, very similar type of look and feel. If I jump back into, I don't want to stay again in slides for too long. If we jump back into App Stores, you'll see, and we go into Azure API Management Analytics. So this has been released today. Very similar in terms of kind of the page. We've got the reports, we've got a video, we've got the test drive experience to get it now. So I'll jump quickly into the test drive experience just to show you what the reports look like. But then what I really want to do is kind of jump into the actual Azure resources that get spun up from a template like this. So you can kind of get an idea of the behind the scenes of the template, not only the front end, but also all the back end components. And this template is quite interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's very involved. So I want to go ahead and do that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into the Azure pieces first before I go through the template visualizations. But before I do that, let's just click on the Get It Now experience just to take a quick look at the architecture in terms of what is actually being spun up with the API management template. And over here, you'll see that the architecture looks very, very different from the one that we were looking at in terms of Facebook. Again, for every template, it's the kind of right experience for it. And hopefully, the internet will kick in. If not, we can just use the slides from here. Okay, we can take a look at the architecture in the slide and then just jump into the Azure portal. So over here, we're actually, if you remember the Facebook one, we kind of created our own ETL using Azure Functions and Logic Apps. Over here, we're using Event Hub and Stream Analytics to pull the data out. And so what's pretty nice about this is you can go ahead and scale up the Event Hub and Stream Analytics as much as you need. And you can also have that real-time component of the template if that's something that you would like to add in yourself. In terms of this particular template, we just get the data into SQL, but you can very easily extend it to add a real-time component either into Power BI or however, you can extend that pipeline however really you would like. We were going to build a real-time kind of hot path ourselves. Unfortunately, the Stream Analytics APIs just doesn't allow for that at the moment. Programmatically, you cannot create an output into a Power BI, into the Power BI service, so we could not do that. So we have Event Hub Stream Analytics going into SQL, and then we have this kind of layer on top, which is basically two logic apps. We talked about logic apps before. I'm actually going to show you what a logic app looks like. And we have a bunch of machine learning that's doing advanced analytics inside the template, which I'll talk about in more detail as well. And we've been actually collaborating with Microsoft Research on this template, who have built in a lot of the intelligence that you're going to see. So yeah, my internet looks like it's dead in terms of this page. Let's just move on into Azure itself. So this template, I went ahead and set this up beforehand, ahead of time, just to show you guys what the resources look like. So I've got Ignite Demo API Management. And this is basically all the different resources that would get set up on your subscription. And now let me just go ahead and zoom into this. So I'm just going to go through and highlight a bunch of the ones that are important. So this is just an API connection. There's nothing really to see here. Event Hub, as I've said, you can go ahead and jump into your Event Hub and scale it up if you want to. If you feel like the SKU that we've selected is not enough, you can go ahead and change that. And the Event Hub just basically pipes the data out of API management into Stream Analytics. That's the function of it. We've got the Stream Analytics job. So we can take a look at the Stream Analytics job that's actually set up. In terms of the query, it's not doing anything too complicated. It's really just taking the data that comes out of Event Hub and then pushing it into SQL. But again, if you were to go ahead and if I just go and stop this for just a second, you could go ahead and change the output of this particular job and add a new kind of output where you could either select something like Power BI to do that kind of real-time component and actually see the data coming out of API management into Power BI in real time. Or you could go about and set something up like a service-based topic. Imagine you wanted to go ahead and actually set up some real-time alerting. So if you're seeing a huge amount of, let's say, failures in a given point of time, or you could set that threshold and say, alert me every time that's going to happen. Again, the infrastructure is there set up for you, but you can go ahead and customize and extend that in any kind of way that you would like. So I'm just going to leave this resource just for a second. OK. And so then we get into kind of the interesting bits, which is the logic apps and kind of the more kind of advanced analytics that we do. So the first one, I'm going to jump into this call frequency logic app. The logic app itself is going to be very, very simple. So again, for those of you guys who haven't maybe seen logic apps before, you'll see that what we basically have is a recurrence trigger. We have it run, let's say, every 6 hours. And then this is basically an Azure ML job that runs. How many of you guys have tried out Azure ML, heard of it before? OK. couple of you. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes going and talking about Azure ML because I think it's a really, really interesting technology. So what Azure ML allows you to do is basically build and author your own machine learning experiments. So what you can basically do inside the Azure ML Studio is, through a very intuitive drag and drop experience, go ahead and set up a bunch of modules that you basically just drag and drop from this control over here and stitch them together and create machine learning experiments. So you can go ahead and create machine learning experiments without needing to know necessarily how to code up your own neural network or how to go ahead and spin up, create, let's say, a Bayesian regression or something like that. So I can literally just type in, let's say, initialize model, and I have my neural network regressions or a classification model, and I can literally just drag and drop them in and connect them up using these kind of little nodes. So in this particular case, we're not actually using any of the out-of-the-box machine learning experiments. This is, again, some work that's been done by Microsoft Research. And what we have is a Python script that we have set up over here. So you can extend it with code if you would like to. So I'm just going to extend this out. And basically, when you connect all of these different modules together, you can run and you can iterate and you can experiment over it just to see what you're setting up. And kind of looking at the results and validating it. And when you're happy with something and you think that this is the kind of experiment I want to create, you can go ahead and deploy it as a web service. And once it's deployed as a web service, you can operationalize it and add it into any pipeline that you might want. And so that's what kind of we've done. We have, if you remember, if I jump back into the slide for a second, we have this machine learning experiment that's kind of sitting on top of the SQL data. And we have that logic app that calls the experiment and basically that experiment connects to this SQL data, does a bunch of clever stuff, and then writes the data back into SQL. And so if we jump into here for a second, I'm not going to go through the Python script in a huge amount of detail, but basically what this Python script is doing is we basically get out the top IP addresses, and we run something called a fast Fourier transform on top of it. And again, I'm not going to spend a whole load of time on this, but you can just think of it as extracting out all the signal from the data. And basically, it's represented through sine and cosine curves. But what it's basically doing is really, really interesting because it's allowing you to be able to visualize patterns in your data a lot more smoothly and without all the noise. And you can start seeing things like patterns or bot detections or potential spikes in the data that you might have not been able to notice otherwise. And I'm going to show you guys the reports after we go through the architecture and the infrastructure. So that's going to be a little bit easier to understand once you actually see it inside the reports. But again, this is some cool stuff that Microsoft Research has built for us in terms of the template to be able to do some of these more advanced analytics scenarios as well. So this is, in terms of the logic app itself, as you can see, it just runs this job on a recurrence. And then we have a stored procedure, which basically just swaps tables in and out. So we get the newest data basically coming in. And I'll come back to this in a little bit. OK, so let's jump into another logic app that we have. And again, logic apps are just really, really great for orchestrating these sorts of workflows. And you can start, even if you extract this out of the kind of concept of the solution templates, you can think of how you can start bringing this into your own pipelines for your data pipelines too. So we have something else. I'm not going to go through all the logic apps, but we go into something called the graph logic app. And so if we jump into this, and we can take a look at behind the scenes of this as well. So over here, we, again, run this on a recurrence. So this runs on a schedule. We get out the top 20 or so IP addresses, and we iterate over the IP addresses. And what we basically figure out is what calls these IP addresses are making. So what kind of operations are basically being called. And we then look at all this historical data. And again, there's some clever machine learning that's running over here that basically figures out and again, it will make more sense when you see the visualizations, visualized in a network graph, but you look at the probability of which operations are being called in what kind of sequence. So you can do some very cool path analysis. So you can kind of figure out, after this operation is likely to be called, and so on. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about this once we actually see the visual, because there's some very cool use cases that you can use for this as well. So yeah, these are basically, this might seem like, there's a lot over here, but really, I'm just trying to give you guys a sense of how rich these templates can be in terms of the kinds of resources and the kinds of things that you can spin up with them. It could be just as simple as connecting to a source application and getting the data into SQL, which we do have some templates. So for example, our sales management template is really about setting up a real-time pipeline of getting every time an opportunity, let's say, gets updated, that data goes into Azure SQL, and it's kind of, the sort of real-time propagation through. And then you have your Power BI reports. But you can make them also much more complicated and much more involved by adding in all these additional components like additional machine learning or additional, let's say, function calls to just run some code on top of them as well. So these are really just the resources I wanted to call out in terms of the solution template. So let's take a look at what it actually looks like once it's set up. So again, this is the demo report that you have on the website. This kind of gives you an overview of all the different, it's kind of like your dashboard view. So an idea of what kind of API calls are being made, how many operations have been called, what are the top operations in a given week, top users for the week. And also you have some KPIs, so how am I doing in terms of the growth in calls, in terms of traffic? Are my errors increasing or decreasing? Is my latency increasing or decreasing? We have set up some KPIs in terms of targets, which is kind of looking at what the previous week numbers were and seeing whether this week is better. But again, because this is Power BI, because you have access to a Power BI desktop file, all of these different KPIs are fully extensible. And you can go ahead and change them to whatever suits your particular purpose. And this is the case for every template that we have. In terms of the following pages, we have another page that looks really into the detail of the API calls that are being made. I can go ahead and have all of these different layers of additional filters that I can add. So I can say, okay, I want to look for a particular subscription for a particular, let's say, operation. How did that vary across time and so on? So I can just drill into the specific things I'm interested in. We have a page for errors, so this is looking at, what are my top errors, what kind of status codes am I seeing? Am I seeing, lots of repeated errors for something? Are these errors to do with something that's coming from my side, or is this a customer doing something wrong? I can do all my diagnostics over here as well. And then we get into the kind of those cool machine learning stuff I was telling you about. So this is the fast Fourier transforms I was telling you about, which is basically looking at signal strengths across time. And so basically, the way we visualize this is using a heat map, as you can see over here. So what you can start basically seeing is these sorts of patterns or spikes. So if we look at this particular IP over here, you'll see that there's a very, very rhythmic pattern of the API calls being made. That's kind of almost, and again, this is grouped by minutes, so it's every kind of that specific interval. And so this is something that's probably some sort of bot. It might not be, but it's something I can definitely start investigating because this does not look like something that's kind of, that looks anomalous. That doesn't look like, it's normal kind of normal traffic. But, again, at least I can go ahead and investigate and see what's going on. And then we also group it on more of an hour basis versus a minute basis. You can actually tweak the logic app to make, we do pass the parameters, so you can make however granular you want this data to be. So if you wanted to look at it at a second level, you can do that too. Caveat there is it is very compute intense, it's very memory intense, so if you have a ton of data, you probably don't want to bring down the granularity too much either. And then in terms of those network graphs, again, this is populated with sample data, so be mindful, it would look very, very different in terms of if it was, real customer data that you're looking at. But you can see the kind of the thickness of these lines determines how, closely associated these various operations are. And so you can start seeing the various kind of likelihoods of call probabilities, and you can see the granular kind of level over here. If you want to isolate it for a specific API as well, you can go ahead and do that. But this is very, very cool because you can start seeing, okay, are there certain operations that just always get called together? And because then you can start, saying, well, maybe I should bundle these up as something, and you can go back to your engineers and start figuring out maybe that there's something more optimal you could be doing there. Or is there things that just should not be going together, which are, which kind of gives me an indicator of maybe there's something wrong with the way the API is working, and I can, again, go back and talk to my engineers. So there's some very cool use cases you can start doing based on this sort of path analysis. So yeah, this is basically the API management solution template I wanted to kind of take you guys through. So with that, I actually wanted to switch gears a little bit and invite David on stage. One of the things that I've kind of talked about is how we like having working with partners to customize these solution templates and extend them. But the other area that we're actually going also is we've spent time building up a platform to allow partners not only to extend solution templates, but actually figuring out how they can build their own solution templates on top of our platform. So I'm really, really excited. We've been working with Neal Analytics on their own solution template, and I just wanted to invite David to give a bit of an overview of what they've been doing.
Hello, I'm David Brown. I work for Neal Analytics. What we do is consulting related to Power BI and Microsoft's advanced analytics technologies. So we're the guys to call if you need help deploying. One of the common needs that we'd seen across our customer base was a common need for doing analytics on Power BI data from the Power BI APIs. This was something that we did for almost every customer as a matter of improving their use of the product. So with that, we can dive deep into kind of what we did and what we're doing. So these are some of the reports that we ended up creating. What this is doing on the back end is stepping through a ETL flow, pulling from a logic app into an Azure SQL database so that we can do historical reporting. Because right now, unless you turn it on in the settings, you're not going to get this data. And even if you turn it on in the settings, it's only going to keep this data for 30 days, which means you won't be able to do long-term reporting. You won't be able to show the impact that improving your reports is having. You won't be able to show which of your subsets of data is walking out the door. And that's the purpose of these reports, is to help answer those basic administration questions that we often got when we were helping out our customers with their implementations of Power BI.
Yeah, so tell me, how did you find, working with the team and in terms of working on top of our platform I'd love to hear more.
Yeah.
The audience would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the platform was excellent to work on. I'm not super deep outside of Power BI. I can put together Power Queries and that sort of thing, but doing the C# and that sort of thing is a little beyond me. So it was really excellent to have the support and superior knowledge that we could rely upon and leverage coming from your team. The vision that you guys are building out, I think, is really cool for having a platform that makes it easy to integrate these business applications and execute. I think one of the things that we're excited about is the upcoming release of Azure Managed Apps. Yeah. If you go back to the Azure Management screen, I think, and this is my interpretation of their product vision as a partner, so I'm not speaking for Microsoft, yeah. But I think the vision there is to allow me as a partner to create my own and manage my own subset of Azure resources. So if you guys are familiar with how Azure works, there's a construct inside of Azure called an Azure, what do you call it? The
resource group?
Yeah, the resource group. So I could create my own Azure resource group and manage it on behalf of a customer through my managed app interface inside of the customer's deployment. What that would mean is I've got my Azure resources here that are separate from my customer's deployment, which means I don't have to have admin access rights to that customer's Azure subscription all up to make changes. I could just have access to my application that I'm running within that customer's instance. For us, this is a really exciting thing that Microsoft's moving on, and what it means from a strategic perspective for us is our really deep expertise in machine learning and predictive analytics is going to be a lot more leverageable as we do these deployments.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, David.
Yeah,
really
absolutely,
appreciate you coming
Justina.
up. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so in terms of, I wanted to go ahead and jump into the roadmap and talk a little bit about that. So, that's a really nice caveat, nice kind of segue into managed apps. This is something, we've been hearing a lot from you guys in terms of what you're looking for, in terms of what you need. There has been a huge amount of interest in having partners build their own solution templates and be able to use our deployment framework and packaging it up and having it hosted on app stores the way, I was just showing you. And, this is something we've been working with Neal Analytics on for the past couple of weeks or months. And, that's their template is going to be coming out next few days, which is really, really exciting for us. And we want to be able to give the opportunity to more and more partners to just leverage the kind of work we're doing. And I'm going to jump into our GitHub a little bit just to show you, what kinds of things we're doing to try and make this as reusable as possible. And so we've been working closely with the managed applications team to be able to extend that functionality for solution templates. It's going. I don't want to give you guys a specific date because we don't have one, and I don't want to promise something and then change it. But if this is something you guys are interested in, please drop me a note after the session, and I will be definitely keeping you up to date as to what we're planning in terms of when this will be supported. But again, yeah, to David's point, basically, a managed application will mean this is like a resource group which you'll be able to deploy inside a user subscription and be able to basically charge on top of. And so that kind of, because again, one of the biggest problems you guys had with the solution templates is in terms of monetization. Because again, from our perspective, we just want to go ahead and get get customers, kickstart these solutions, get customers started quickly on top of Azure, on top of Power BI. But from a partner perspective, the play is a little bit different. Of course, the solution templates will give the lead generation, and you'll be able to tell who has kind of gone through and try to set up a solution template or has set up a solution template. But that monetization aspect is something that's very important for us to be able to solve as well. So this is something that we're very excited about being able to support. In terms of other roadmap plans, we have a whole bunch of templates that are in the pipeline that we're working on. So the ones that we have landed, which I've talked about, is Facebook Page Analytics and the Azure API Management, which are out this week. The Power BI Admin Analytics will be one that's going to be out very soon that we've, I said, working with Neon Analytics on. But there's also a whole number of different partners that we have been working with on top, about these, working around these solution templates, which we will be releasing. Some of these are things we are working on ourselves. So, we're working closely on one with, let's say, Reddit, and Reddit is actually involved themselves in the solution template. We're working on some things around education analytics with Edfi. And there's a bunch of Microsoft teams internally which are building solution templates as well. So we've got one for Microsoft Research working on things around academic knowledge. We've got one. Unfortunately, the session is going on right now, so I was really hoping to be able to attend it. But we've got one for Office 365 to do advanced usage analytics as well, which should be very, very exciting. I know there's a lot of people interested in that. So there's, as I said, a whole host of different templates, both our team, internal Microsoft teams, and external teams who are working on this. So we're excited to get more and more of these templates out into the market very, very soon. Now, in terms of what does it actually mean to build a solution template? Well, if I jump back into, if I go ahead and jump back into Power BI just for a second, that's not going to work. And if we navigate back into solution templates, you'll notice that for every solution template that we do have, so if I just jump into one, we have, everything is available in GitHub. So all our code is open sourced. Everything that we've created, sits inside GitHub. So you can go ahead and check this out at any point in time that you'd like. I don't want to spend kind of too long going through our GitHub and stuff, but I just want to give you guys an idea of what it actually means to package up a solution template. I'm going to try and talk about this on a pretty high level, but we basically have, everything that we spin up is, we call it, the construct is called an action. And so you'll see that we have, just folders and folders of different actions. So we'll have, let's say, one specific for, let's say, Azure Machine Learning. And this will be things like deploy Azure Machine Learning experiment, deploy a workspace, export an experiment. So anything that you might want to do, if you have an Azure ML experiment you want to operationalize, there will be a bunch of actions that you can call, based on that. You want to do something with Azure Storage, cognitive services, anything, we have this whole kind of library of actions. And so what's important for us is for every template will reuse these actions that basically run when you have that kind of deployment. So I was showing you over here, that kind of yellow progress bar, that's basically calling a whole bunch of actions behind the scenes. And the way we kind of stitch these actions up together is, if I just jump back into here, is we have an app for every single solution template that we have. We just call it an app. And if I go into the Microsoft released ones, we talked about something like the Facebook Page Analytics one. We have like an initialization file, basically, which is just a JSON file that basically stitches up all of these actions together and stitches up something called pages together. So we also have reusable pages. So you know how I was showing you this web installer and had that getting started page, it had an Azure page. Those are all reusable pages as well. So basically this just describes, okay, these are the pages that need to run, and then these are the actions that need to run, if that makes sense. And so if you think about how you could go ahead and build something like this, a lot of these things will already be in place for you. There will be a getting started page where you'll need to bring your architecture diagram and the description of it. The Azure page, well, it's already there. So if the user needs to authenticate to Azure, you just go and say, and you put inside this kind of file, okay, just use the Azure page. You want to have an Azure SQL page, you just use our Azure SQL page. And again, you can just reuse all our different actions. The only thing you need to really bring is the IP that you want to operationalize. So in the case of something like, let's say Facebook, it would be the report itself, or it would be what's running inside the function. In terms of API management, it would be what does that, let's say, Python script look like? What does the Azure ML experiment look like? But in terms of the deployment and the packaging, we have kind of spent a lot of time building out this platform to make it easy for partners to be able to build this stuff as well. So again, I will leave quite a long time for Q&A. So I try to cover a lot of different areas at a high level, but we can dive deeper into anything that you guys might be interested in. Happy to stay back and do that for as long as you guys want. In terms of, so if we just jump back over here, I promised you we would set up this Facebook template, so you can see everything said it's been deployed successfully. So we can go ahead and download this report right now, and let's just take a look at, hopefully everything has been set up. I just want to kind of show you the kind of end-to-end experience of setting things up. So the reason we give a desktop file is, again, we are trying to say you can go ahead and customize this as much as you'd like. And so we could have uploaded it to the service, but just keeping it as the desktop experience for now made sense. And so the one thing I need to do before I see any data, right now this is going to be empty, is I just need to refresh my Power BI report. And this might prompt me for my SQL credentials. It depends whether it's cached them or not. But basically, we do some clever magic behind the scenes where we are able to pass in the SQL server and the database name. We don't pass in the username or password, which is why it could prompt me for credentials if it hasn't cached them. But that's pretty much all you need to do to actually connect to the data. And then everything should just go ahead and refresh and run. So I'm going to just give this a second to run. While this is running, there are a bunch of sessions I would recommend you guys check out if you'd like to learn a little bit more. Some of these sessions have already happened, so you can go ahead and watch them. But we've got the BI in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, which is Kamal's sessions. If you want to see more about the use case with Real Madrid specifically and how we worked with them and what kind of things they're doing with Facebook data and how they're using insights, it's super interesting. There's a very, very cool demo around where they talk about all that. I would highly recommend. We have the Office session, which again is unfortunately happening right now, where they're going to talk a little bit about what they're doing with Office and usage analytics in terms of solution templates. And then we have a session tomorrow around Azure API management, where Matt is going to talk a little bit, again, about the solution template that I showed you guys today for API management. So this is still taking its time to refresh. In terms of call to action, here's our alias. If you guys have any questions about anything you've seen, if you guys have template ideas that you would like us to build, or you have templates that you would like to build and you'd like to get in touch with us, generally, when we work with partners and partners want to build solution templates, I showed you a high level of our GitHub, but we wouldn't expect anyone to just jump into our GitHub straight away. We'd be more than happy to get on a call and have one of our developers take you guys through it and kind of help you understand how to get set up. So, if you have anything that you are interested in around, or, maybe becoming a partner for an existing solution template, again, please contact our alias. More than happy to talk about, answer any questions you might have or brainstorm some ideas. Highly encourage you guys to set up, a solution template yourself and give it a go and, see how you get on. Talk to your customers, bring up solution templates conversation, show them the demos. And honestly, when I've talked to a lot of customers as well, and showing a customer a demo on their own data is just so different than showing them a generic Power BI report. I've had this with the sales management template, which we built, where I showed them the sample report, and then I showed them I set it up on their own data. And I mean, when I showed them the sample report, they were kind of like, yeah, this looks pretty good. This is nice. When I showed them the report on their own data, suddenly they were just finding insights that they didn't know about before, and things that didn't quite look right with the data. Like there was something that was in the closing stage, but had, was very poorly qualified and stuff. So they're like, how is this even possible? They started kind of having conversations among themselves. And so the engagement level was just way, way higher. The nice thing with the Facebook, Twitter, and the news one is you don't need access to anything in terms of the customer. If you want to set it up on a bunch of Twitter hashtags that are relevant to a given customer, you can go ahead and do that very, very easily. So you can show something meaningful to a customer without actually needing to connect to any of their own proprietary private data. And that's super, super helpful. It's super helpful for our field when they do a lot of EBCs and they talk to customers. They can set up a demo like this a couple of days before and have a meaningful conversation rather than just showing kind of a bunch of sample reports that have no real kind of connection to the customer. So, it's a great way of being able to have that kind of more industry relevant conversation and have, and set that up very, very quickly. You saw how long it took me to set up the Facebook one. It took me, about 5 minutes. So I've, talked to partners who have just go ahead and set these up before, before their meetings and just have a bunch of them ready. And then if you want to, get the latest updates about solution templates, you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Got my Twitter handle there. So yeah. So let's jump back into, okay, there we go. So we've seen now that, again, the reports look very, very similar as I've showed you before. The only thing we need to do is kind of format the dates a little bit because currently they're looking at the full year. So I can go ahead and say July 1st up to, let's say, today. And you'll see that these reports look just like the ones I was showing you for the Power BI. You've got all your insights, set up. So again, same reports, just with different data. And it took me that whole 5-10 minutes to set up. We've pulled historical data, going back 3 months. So you don't start out with an empty report either. If you've just set it up for Facebook, you get back that kind of historical data, which is really nice. Same thing for the Azure API management stuff I was showing you. It also pulls back the last 90 days. So yeah, you don't start with an empty report. You start with something meaningful. So I'm going to leave this slide up just in case anyone wants to take pictures, get our links. But really, I just wanted to open things up for Q&A, for hear your guys' thoughts. Is there anything you wanted me to dive deeper into? Maybe you wanted me to go through some of the other templates that you saw. Anything that comes to mind? Just request us to go to the mic so that it's heard in the recording. But yeah, with that, thanks a lot.